State House. Welcome to tonight's conversation, Green Jobs Now, how we go from oil wells to solar panels and full employment too. We're going to be talking tonight with Dr. Patricia DeMarco. She's an academic, an author, a filmmaker, and a public servant. So she's got a wide background. We'll talk about that in a bit. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation. I'm urging everyone who's tuning in to check out our webpage. It's Mike4, and that's FORPA64.com. While you're there, make sure you click on our Facebook page. You can check out some of our previous conversations. Also, check out the Twitter feed. I've been a Twitter user for a while, but I wasn't much of a tweeter. I'm getting better at it. And also Instagram. I never used Instagram before, but now I'm starting to do some short videos, so check them out. Also, I invite you to contribute to our campaign. We have a special offer tonight. Any donations we get tonight will be matched. We had a donor that said they would do that. So if you've been waiting to donate, tonight's the night you can get your donation doubled. Before we get to Patty, I want to make sure that everyone knows that this is a conversation. Dr. DeMarco and I are going to be talking, but we will invite you to ask questions. I'm going to be monitoring the Facebook feed, and you can ask your questions in the comment section underneath the Facebook feed. All you got to do is type it in there, and I will try very hard to get those questions in if we get them. So I often hear discussions about the Green New Deal proposals, and they're framed with things like, yeah, but, as in, yeah, we need to address climate change, but we can't afford to destroy the economy. Or, yeah, we need to get rid of fossil fuels, but the sun won't always shine and the wind won't always blow. Or, yeah, but fracking and cracking pollute the air, but sometimes we need to have those things because we need to heat our houses and we need plastic. Well, tonight we're going to talk about that kind of stuff. We're sitting down with Dr. DeMarco, Patricia DeMarco. I'm sure you're going to hear about a lot of the yeahs, and she's going to address the buts. And she's going to tell us all kinds of stuff. She's an expert. Let me just give you a little bit of background. She's a native of Pittsburgh with a doctorate in biology from the University of Pittsburgh. She's spent 30 years in the energy and environmental tracks in both private and public sector. She's a Rachel Carson Scholar and served as executive director of the Rachel Carson Homestead Association and director of the Rachel Carson Institute at Chatham University. She holds the office of vice president of the Forest Hills Borough Council. She sits as secretary on the Board of Trustees for the Phipps Conservatory and Botanical Gardens. She's an author. Her book is entitled Pathways to Our Sustainable Future, A Global Perspective from Pittsburgh. It explores positive pathways towards sustainability based on 28 case studies from Pittsburgh. Inspired by the Rachel Carson's environmental ethic, the book was funded by W. Clyde and Ida Mae Thurman Fund of Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh Foundation. It was published by the University of Pittsburgh Press in 2017. She's the executive producer of a documentary film with Mark Dixon, The Power of One Voice, a 50-year, there it is, a 50-year perspective of the life of Rachel Carson. And she served as a technical advisor for the video series with Kirsty Janza titled Sustainability Pioneers. Hi, Patty, and welcome to our conversation.
Hi, Michael.
So I'd like to frame this conversation. Our climate is in a state of chaos. We're facing 100-year floods every year. We are having 1,000-year droughts every decade. We're breaking heat records all the time. And we have longer and more intense hurricane and fire seasons. I pick peppers in my garden every year for the last 5 years. We have a great Pacific garbage patch with plastic and all kinds of other garbage floating in the Pacific. It's the size of Massachusetts. We also have climate refugees, we have food insecurity, we have drying aquifers, we have national governments that are pushing fracking and cracking and great job as great job machines. And we have some people, especially around here, who are pushing the whole idea that the coal jobs are coming back and we need coal. So what do you make of that, Patty?
Oh dear. Well, we're really facing a triple existential threat, and we can't underestimate the facts of the reality that we are facing, that our climate is changing in ways that are going to be less and less and less supportive of life as we know it. And if we don't do something about it really soon on a massive scale, we're not going to have a viable world for our children. And certainly even now, the carbon that has been put into the atmosphere is going to burden another 200 years at least, because it isn't easily removed. So we're not really talking about a transition anymore. We're talking about a transformation of our way of life into something that is better and more resilient and more equitable, that lives in harmony with nature. And the reason I get so excited about this is the following. We are creatures of the earth. We are animals. And the laws of nature work. They are not negotiable. They will work. So if we stop doing the things that harm the environment and harm the atmosphere and harm the world that is our life support system, we can fix this. This is a human generated problem that really only goes back about 100 years to the Industrial Revolution, when we started burning fossil fuels at a very rapid rate. And it reversed in decades processes that nature took millions of years to put in place. So we are speeding up the return to the atmosphere of carbon dioxide that was sequestered in ancient algae pools and plants in the form of coal and oil and natural gas. So there's no way you can reverse that millions of years of sequestration in decades without having an effect on the very processes that made life on Earth possible. So if we can stop doing what's hurting us and live in ways that recognize the value of our life support system, which is the living earth, you know, that provides what we absolutely need to live, is fresh air, clean water, fertile ground, and a temperate range of temperatures that allow all of us to coexist. We're all interconnected. We don't stand alone. And the minute we recognize that we are natural world creatures that depend on the living earth, and stop treating the earth as though something we can turn from raw material to trash as rapidly as possible, then we will get ourselves back on the right track.
That's a powerful statement. When you talk about what our economy does, it turns natural resources into trash as quickly as possible. When I read that on your blog, it blew me away. I hadn't thought of it in those terms. So you sort of talked about it, but what if we don't do anything, Patty? What if we continue just doing the same old stuff that we've been doing for decades? What happens?
You know,
You did. Go ahead.
Not acting on climate change. You can look at the 4th National Climate Assessment that came out in the day after Thanksgiving in 2017 was the time it was supposed to be issued. And it was up for one day, and then it was taken down and put into the archive immediately. But that report, which is mandated by Congress every 4 years, it said that we really are already seeing tremendous costs from not addressing climate change. 160 billion a year in lost wages from heat-induced productivity reduction, for example. 87 billion a year by the year 2100 in higher energy costs due to a mounting demand on a power system that's made less and less reliable by extreme weather. So, you know, the hotter it gets, the harder the power plants have to work. Atlanta, they derated their power plants 5 times this summer because the cooling was not adequate in the river. The rivers were too warm to cool power plants, so they had to derate them. That's what I'm talking about. $507 billion worth of infrastructure damage from real estate that's at risk of being inundated by rising sea levels. You've already seen that happening along the coastal areas of our country. Both the eastern, the southern, and the western coasts are having incursions of salt water, higher tides, more vehement tides on a regular basis. The real estate in those areas, in some cases, they've declared that you can't mention climate change or note rising seas in real estate transactions, but that doesn't mean they aren't going to happen anyway, okay? The laws of nature are not negotiable. That's going to happen. 507 billion worth of infrastructure damage, 1.2 to 1.4 billion per year from inland flooding for destruction of bridges from high weather events like we've had here.
Exactly, yeah.
I was looking at the infrastructure in the former Churchill Valley Country Club. And you remember in July when we had 4 inches of rain in 2 days, so about 3 or 4 of the asphalt paved bridges for the golf cart trails were completely washed away, which means the river, the water that came into that area had to be more than 10 feet deep because it wouldn't have fixed. So this
Go ahead, I'm sorry. I'll make my point later.
$230 million a year in losses of shellfish harvests, because as the sea becomes more acid, shellfish cannot form shells. And we're having enough acidification going on in the oceans that we're already seeing depression of things like oysters and clams and shrimp that are high value, high cash crops. 140 billion a year in recreation industry losses from disappearing coral reefs and fishing industry, and cold water fishing and skiing have also been affected. So this is already documented losses from not addressing climate change. So we can't afford not to take care of these things. This isn't a matter of it's going to cost us too much to address the problem. Failing to address the problem has had a big
we're already paying for it.
There are 2 other areas. One, a major report came out just this week from the financial advisors, a body of financial advisors, and they are arguing that failure to address climate change is a major challenge to our financial system because the insurance industry is taking huge losses. Investments are no longer stable in areas that they have long been stable, and that does include petrochemical industries. And the markets are shifting all over the world to demand products that are more climate friendly. So the financial markets are under stress and looking at tremendous uncertainties. And national security concerns, even though this has been downplayed in recent years, climate has been a threat on a number of levels, not only from the physical effects that we've been just talking about, but also because of the climate refugees. And we are experiencing that not only from country to country, but even within our own country. People migrating away from coastal areas because the land is eroding, and those who can leave do, and those who can't leave are in greater and greater and greater distress. So this is a problem that is not going to get better unless we address it head on. And the longer we fail to recognize and address these issues, the more difficult it's going to be to solve them. So
this thing really hits folks like in our region. I heard a bunch of people in the last several months when we've had these torrential downpours, people dealing with flooding basements and that kind of stuff. And, they've lived in their houses for decades and never had this problem. But now, these torrential downpours. So moving back to things, you talked about the costs that we're facing. What about how can we transition? What about the cost of actually the transition, and how is that actually a better thing for us and the climate?
Well, first thing, you have to recognize and accept the fact that the costs are real, and that we have to face the fact that they're not going to go away by themselves. So just recognizing that. Once you do that, you can look at the fact that we have heavily subsidized the fossil industries for years and years and years, back to 1837, which was the law that gave the primacy of mineral rights over surface rights. And it's still in law, it's still in effect. So when you have things like organic farms being intruded upon by fracking or mining operations because the mineral rights give supremacy over the farm, you are basically making the public policy choice that extracting fossil materials has more value than producing food.
Let me just interrupt for a second, because one of our upcoming conversations is actually going to address that very issue. We're hoping that Maggie Henry, an organic farmer from, well, used to be an organic farmer from Lawrence County, who was basically driven out of her farm because of fracking and also a gas processing plant less than a mile away. So thanks for bringing that up. Yeah.
The thing that makes that so critical for us in Pennsylvania is that climate change doesn't have an effect equally everywhere. And we will be one of the places where we will have water, where we will have fertile land and be capable of growing food. So every time we make a decision to abandon or foreclose the use of land for forestry or for tree cover or plants or farmed goods, we are making the decision that narrows that base of something as essential as food. And it is really alarming to me that Pennsylvania has an amazing history of really a great wealth of agricultural production. It's still a quarter of our economy and has been steadily for years and years. And that is one of the areas that has so much potential to not only flourish for the people who live in Pennsylvania, but also to be a source of carbon capture, to help repair the damage over time, and also to help feed people beyond our own borders. So it's a life and death kind of a decision, and the thing is, we have better choices. And what I get excited about when I talk about transformation of our economy is if you think about what goes on right now, if your goal is to have a sustainable situation, you think about having the environment and our society and cultural values and our economy in balance, right? So that all of those things are reflected in the value and are treasured and recognized and carry their own weight. If you think about the way things are pretty much since the middle of the 80s forward, when market economics became the driver for public policy in so many areas, that economic determination bubble has swamped the other two, to the point that instead of having three equal circles that weigh and balance out what makes our society function, you have this huge balloon where the dollar is king and everything else is subservient. Well, the things that make us human and the things that make our life worth living and our world alive around us are not necessarily strictly in the economy part of the equation. And another piece of evidence of that is that the stock market is doing just fine, and we're approaching 24 million people unemployed. There's something wrong with this picture, people. Our value system has become really skewed. And so we need to recalibrate a way of living that lives closer to in harmony with the natural world. And then
going back to that stock market thing too, though, I mean, even that is kind of misleading, because the companies that are driving the stock market to record highs are actually very few. I think there's like 5 or 6, and the rest of the market's pretty darn depressed.
That's right. And
yeah.
Well, we can go into that a little bit later too, but if you look at the income gains at the top of the top 1% since 1980. Real wealth, and this is Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. It's a part of the Congressional Budget Office. They've shown a 226% increase in wealth between 1985 and 2015. And the bottom 20%, has shown an 85% increase in wealth over that same time. The middle 60%, that's most of us, have only shown a 47% increase in wealth over that same period of time. So 226% increase by the top 1%. People who get cost of living adjustments through welfare and Social Security and such, 79 to 85% increase in wealth. The people who go to work every day and pay taxes and are trying to keep it together, 47% increase in wealth over that same period. 226 versus 47. There's something wrong with this picture. When the 1% is that far above everybody else, and the people that work hard, the 60% middle of the population who lives, there's no way. We've got to straighten this out, because the wealth inequities are preventing us from capturing our full potential.
Well, that's one of the things we're talking about in this campaign, is that frankly, our district has not been well represented, that the rich and powerful get all kinds of breaks. And we've been hemorrhaging since basically 1980. We've been hemorrhaging jobs and young people. We use our young people because they don't have a future here. There's no employment for them, so they have to leave. I have 4 kids, and 2 of them had to move away to work, and the other 2 often have to leave this area just to get the work in their field. So it's sad. Yeah.
And the thing is, these are policy choices. We can make better choices. And I think one of the things that people have come to recognize is that the green economy has a huge diversity of job opportunities. This is not just windmills and sunshine, okay? There is a huge diversity of things in the green economy. And what's a green job anyway, okay? And so what we look at is a green energy field is has sectors ranging from clean energy all the way to environmental management, and they all have shown robust job growth in the last couple of decades at least. Renewable energy systems have had 777,000 jobs in 2016. They're growing at a rate of 25% per year. And if you
Can I interrupt just for a second, Patty, because I want to get this thing out there too. I often hear that Pennsylvania is not a place for renewable energy. That we're not good. What do you think about that?
Well, that's just wrong. First of all, I can tell you from personal experience, we built a net zero energy borough building in my borough without raising taxes. And it has had the experience of making more energy than it uses on average every month of the year. We haven't paid an electric bill for 18 months. It's making more electricity than it uses because we have a solar roof. We have a geothermal earth tube heating and ventilation system, and the building is comfortable year round, and it's making more energy than it uses on an ongoing basis. Now, in 1992, there was a proposal in the National Energy Conservation and Production Act to make a national building code requirement for passive solar design for all new buildings. And it went down in flames because the construction industry said it would be too expensive. This building is not too expensive. Building techniques and technologies have come a long, long way. And if anything, they're cheaper because you don't need a furnace. You don't need a lot of, a lot of HVAC equipment. The earth tubes and a pump work fine. And what we've had here is the technology and materials has advanced tremendously much. So if you have a passive solar design building, your operating costs are something like 97 cents a square foot, as opposed to $2.21 a square foot for your average gas-fired standard building.
I think that is so powerful. I hope people realize, that what you're talking about is transformative, the way we look at housing and other things in this part of the world.
But think about it, if you were just making that kind of a determination as a national requirement and did nothing else, you would have all of the, look at all the new construction that's going on, and major renovations. If you have a way to say, your building, when you occupy it, is going to have such a lower operating cost, you are saving money, and it isn't uncomfortable. I mean, it runs on electricity. So as you electrify the system more and more with interconnected, where the buildings become power sources as part of the solution, and interconnected in small groups with a common storage area. I've been arguing for years that the utilities should be providing group storage facilities and put it in the rate base like they do for power plants, so that you share the cost and share the benefit, and then add artificial intelligence for balancing the load and the generation among the various pieces. We could do that, okay? The University of Pittsburgh has a whole department under Greg Reed that is working out the logistics and the mechanics and all of the hardware that need to happen for that kind of an artificial intelligence managed microgrid system to work. Carnegie Mellon, they got another whole crew over there that does the same kind of thing. We can do this, people. We know how to do this. It isn't a technology problem. It's an ethics problem. It is a decision that we have made, that we're going to hang on to that fossil past as hard as we can for as long as we can, in spite of the facts, because certain few companies have a vested interest in having that happen. And again, the 1% is driving the 90%, and this is just wrong. It isn't a matter of technology. It's a matter of politics, political will, and the will of the nation being suppressed by a
absolutely
people.
Yeah.
Leaders. So I argue that once we begin to recognize the potential of having better solutions to these problems, the solutions will amplify tremendously much. And they're good jobs. I mean, the average job in mean hourly wages for the clean energy economy sector in 2016, the national average wage was $23.86 an hour. Clean energy production jobs averaged $28.41 an hour. Energy efficiency jobs, $25.90. Environmental management, $27.45, all the way up to $40. So
that's phenomenal.
These are average wage, and they go up and down around that. But the national average is $23.86 an hour for skilled labor. So it isn't true that you have only low skill, low wage jobs. That isn't true at all.
That's powerful. I mean, the average wage in Venango County right now is $19.38 an hour, which is low. I got some comments in the comment section of the live stream. Let me run a few of them by you. The first one is from Gail, and she says the Green New Deal addresses economic inequality. So I'm not, if you want to comment on that or not. Tommy says we either pay now or we pay later with interest. I think you hit that one. Someone's screen froze, and I apologize for that. And then we have, I believe, in addition to the energy transition, we need to reduce energy consumption, especially in the richest countries, changing behaviors and habits, especially, I just lost it.
Well, that addresses the per capita consumption, and that's true. The top 10% in terms of wealth, including our country, contribute 50% of the greenhouse gas emissions, and the lower 50% of the population of the world only contributes 10%. So we are per capita making more of the problem happen than people in, we use twice as much energy per capita as they do in France, and about 3 times as much per capita as they do in Germany. We are not that much farther advanced than France or Germany. We're just a lot more wasteful. Yeah.
So, Tommy, also, I know Tommy. He's actually lives in the district. He's a 17-year-old high school student at Cranberry High. And when you mentioned artificial intelligence, that got his ears up. He said, that's what I'm wanting to do. The AI stuff, automation and that kind of stuff. So this is a job that someone in the district could benefit from, and maybe we won't lose Tommy.
Well, I hope not, because, you know, one of the things that we are finding is that, especially when you're looking at reducing fuel intense activities, like look how much we've been getting done without having to drive around to meetings. And I'm working on a major collaboration right now among people in 4 states called the Reimagine Appalachia Project. We would not be able to meet with each other from Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Kentucky on a weekly basis, sometimes more than once a week, if we all had to drive somewhere to meetings. So, you know, having teams, now it's nice if we can meet each other once in a while, so I know who they are, but, and that's been a strain, but having the ability to use telecommunication for things like we're doing tonight. If we had a meeting in your town hall or in your library, I don't know how many people are on now watching us, but I doubt it would be that many. If we had them all in a room, you'd have 18, 20 people. I'm sure you have more than 18 to 20 people tonight.
I don't know. We'll find out. I can't even figure that out. That's beyond my abilities.
So, you know, when you have artificial intelligence, a lot of people say, oh, it displaces jobs, it gets rid of workers. Well, that's always been the trajectory of progress. You know, jobs change in nature, but you're going to need people to program. You're going to need people to make the interconnectivity platforms. You're going to need people who know how to transfer those ideas into reality. So the microgrid is an ideal application of artificial intelligence, which has not been widely applied yet. There are some smart meters where you can program them to cap your household use at, say, the output of your solar system, and it decides what goes on and off so that you don't even notice the pulses going on and off, like your hot water heater and your refrigerator and your freezer can cycle on and off without reducing performance at all. You wouldn't even know about it if you had an artificial intelligence management system for your appliances. So there's a whole world of potential that has not been fully actuated yet. And people say, how are we going to pay for this? The Green New Deal is too expensive. Well, we're spending a lot of money subsidizing fossil fuels every year. And much of that is hardwired into the budget. And if we would just look at getting, I think it's like $780 billion a year hardwired in subsidies into fossil fuel industries for things that we should not be doing more of. And even if you just stop the subsidies and let the market, you know, go forward on renewable and other industries, you'd be better off. But you could deliberately help some of those transformations, especially in things like public transportation, to amplify our public transportation and electrify it and help to get, you know, jobs making electric vehicles on a large scale, like trucks and trains. I was giving a presentation in Erie, and the guys at WABCO up there, they make locomotive engines, and they were saying, you know, well, we keep going down and down because they're not making locomotives anymore, but they could make wind turbines without even retooling the plant and be back up to 3 shifts. So it's a policy decision that says we're deciding that we're going to blow up mountains and keep mining coal to thinner and thinner seams, when we could make a policy decision that says we're going to help tool up our plants to make electric vehicles and machinery that makes wind farms and produce solar systems here instead of importing them from China, where they're subsidized heavily. And I think it's a matter of making choices about what we want our future to be like.
Let me go with that, because you and I talked when we were planning this thing. We talked about Joy Manufacturing, which was a very large plant in Franklin. It was one of the biggest employers in the district. 600, I think it was 600 workers worked there. They made coal mining equipment, and you threw out 2 really, I think, interesting proposals that we could talk about. And one of them was, you said that there is a carbon sequestration process that actually puts those old coal mines to work, and that some of the equipment could be used. Talk about that.
Well, they're in Germany, for example, they're using old mine shafts for compressed air storage, so that when you have more than you need of wind or solar, or you're making energy from anaerobic digesters and you have more than you need at a moment, they compress air that are packed into coal mine tunnels. So they make these big cylinders, and you think of a bicycle pump, except it's a lot bigger, and it compresses the air. And then when they need the power, they release it, and it releases a flywheel, and it generates back. So you pump 3 and you get back 2. So
yeah, let me go back and fix that, because I don't want anyone thinking that I was thinking, I was thinking carbon sequestration, but that was something else. And I want to talk about that later too. But because we did talk about that. But yeah, keep talking about that, because I think that's fascinating.
So you can use, coal mines, and coal mining manufacturing places can manufacture those kinds of pumps and cylinders and machinery that grind up rock. You can use that for other things, retool it, use those sites for other things, including moving into a circular economy where we begin capturing and reusing materials instead of turning them to trash. And this is something we really have to start doing a lot more diligently, because we're producing material just for the purpose of using it. You know what the average useful life is of a plastic bag, for example?
Not long enough.
12 minutes. Do you know how long it takes for it to come apart into little tiny pieces and decompose? 400 years. There's something out of whack here, people. You make stuff that lasts 400 years and it has a useful life of 12 minutes. I don't think so.
There's that equation you were talking about at the very beginning about our economy's built on turning raw materials into trash. Yeah. The other proposal you had thrown out there for Joy Manufacturing, you had talked about geothermal heat pumps.
Well, geothermal is really cool. We use it in our building, and if you're going to put it in, especially in a retrofit situation, you need to be able to drill pipes and tunnels into the ground, and then put a heat transfer fluid there. It's the same equipment that drills horizontal drilling for gas wells. It's the same technique. So all those people who know about rock and horizontal, mine drilling and so forth, those skills are all transferable to geothermal earth tube HVAC systems. Now they might not be 4-foot bore, but they're going to be useful. And if you decide that you're going to do large buildings with passive design, including geothermal earth tubes for heating and cooling, then those kinds of large equipment manufacturing situations would actually be very transferable. The other thing that we can do here is to look at what you do to replace all the plastic. People say, oh, we can't do without plastic. Everything is plastic. Well, it has become so, but not out of need. It has become so out of market pressure from an industry who's trying to get richer and richer by pushing it onto people, because gas has been really kept very cheap. It isn't actually very cheap. It's highly subsidized, and they keep the price down. But if you think about 1960, I don't know how many of you remember 1960, but that's the days of my youth, the bygone days of my misspent youth. We were using about a quarter as much plastic per capita in 1960 as we are now. And don't tell me we were worse off. I mean, we didn't suffer for lack of stuff, but we did not have so much stuff that was designed to be thrown away immediately. And I think when you look at what you actually need in the way of materials and start thinking about designing things to be reused and recaptured, and look at what can be brought from the natural world into serving those needs. So fiber instead of plastic fiber, polyethylene, polyurethane, all these things, nylon, all these artificial fabrics. Well, there's a lot of hemp, there's a lot of bamboo There's a lot of still linen and cotton that can be made into fibers to meet those kinds of needs. And they say, well, they don't perform as well. Well, okay, we can work on that. Those are not unsolvable problems. You don't need to have plastic in order to have, breathable fibers. And if you do things like begin growing hemp in places that are difficult to grow crops, especially, which is a lot of places that have been formerly mined. Industrial hemp makes a tremendous amount of fiber. You can get a lot of fiber per acre, and they are producing about $480 profit per acre for industrial hemp that makes fiber-based things. Now, some of the things like rope that were made in colonial times are still usable today. They're that durable. But if you bury them in the ground, they decompose into materials that are not harmful to plants, animals. They return to natural materials because they're not artificial. The synthetically manufactured things don't break down by enzymes. So when they go into the biosphere, whether it's in the ocean or in the rivers or in the land, they are mechanically ground into small pieces, smaller and smaller and smaller pieces, but they don't come apart chemically. Things like styrofoam, polystyrene, there's nothing in the natural world that knows how to eat those. So they get into tiny pieces and then they get eaten, and then they become a problem in the food chain because they're not nourishing. They don't provide nutrient, but they block up, especially sea creatures. It's just awful. But now land creatures as well, and things have traveled up the food chain so that even people have plastic in their bodies as a result of the contamination that we've pretty much inundated through the world.
Yeah, we just had a comment. This is from Ellen. Actually, Ellen, the backstory on Ellen is that the Mariner East pipeline was forced through her property, through eminent domain. She didn't want it there, but it went anyway. But the Mariner East is heading from the west to the east, where it's going to be shipped to Scotland to make more profit. More plastic. But what she wrote is the industry is now touting how it is leading the fight against COVID-19 with the production of PPE.
Well,
So.
I've dealt with my share of the medical industry, and using plastic for single-use things for sanitation bases, it seems like a highly justifiable thing. But the autoclave worked really well. And the levels of infection from days when you autoclaved stuff and put them in sealed containers, afterward paper usually, you did not have massive rampant infections going on in hospitals, even though you didn't have plastic materials that were used once and thrown away. So I think a lot of this, again, it's a convenience sort of thing. But if you pare it away and look at the burden of that plastic in coming to you in terms of health effects of the people who are working in the industry and people who live near the production facilities, the Cancer Alley statistics in Baton Rouge, which they're trying to transplant to the Ohio River Valley because the hurricanes are wiping them out 9 times in the last 5 years. That's why they want to move up here. It has nothing to do with anything else. And we have to decide, are we going to become the next Cancer Alley when there are good alternatives to what they're making?
Well, that's a very good question because, again, I don't want to talk dirt on my opponent, but we did a lunch and learn thing in Harrisburg a little bit over a year and a half ago, and we invited experts, Ned Katire from the cancer cluster down in Washington and southwestern Pennsylvania. We had Dr. Schmidt from Johns Hopkins University talking about the health effects from near around fracking infrastructure. We had all these folks there. We also had Sandra Steingraber to talk about her experience, and also we had the Physicians for Social Responsibility issuing the 6th edition of their compendium. But anyway, I went and invited him, and his comment was, first of all, we need to have a cracker plant in Venango County. We need that. We need to all the jobs they're doing. I just saw today he was touting the 300,000 jobs that have come to Pennsylvania and the 6,700 jobs that are there because of, well, 300,000 jobs because of fracking and 6,700 jobs because of the cracker plant. But you just hammered it. I mean, there are health consequences. There are all kinds of environmental and climate consequences to this. And yet we have government, our federal government and our state government are working very hard to poison us and to do our climate in.
It goes back to that argument that I made at the beginning, where what counts is the economics. And when you can put something into dollar value, then it matters. But tell me that the health of your children doesn't matter. And tell me that the neighborhood in which these industries reside doesn't matter, because the people who don't work there don't live within a mile of those plants. That's called a sacrifice zone. Sacrifice zone should be illegal. There's no reason in the world that we should be pursuing industries that have something where you know that within a mile of the plant, people are going to be sick. And therefore they call it, you know, we just throw those people away. That isn't an ethical society. It may be a highly productive, competitive, economic decision for a multinational corporation that does not send its profits into its community. And if you talk to people who live in places like Clairton, where US Steel has been the major employer and they make lots of money, okay, lots. They're poor communities because nobody invests back into those communities. Now, you tell me that if you had said to the people of, you know, Beaver and Butler and, you know, where the cracker plant is, we're going to give you $1.6 billion in incentives to invest in your community. You think they wouldn't be able to come up with things?
Absolutely.
People
and without health consequences too.
And if you ask them, I mean, I participated in the Reimagine Beaver project. And if you ask the people who are there, if you have that money to choose what you do with it, they didn't come up with a cracker plant. They wanted to do green chemistry. They wanted to put eco-industrial parks on brownfields. They wanted to practice sustainable agriculture. They wanted to do riverfront development and restoration of their streams and fields. People do not want to invest in things that poison each other.
Well, even the workers don't want to go to work and get sick. They want to work, they want to be well paid, but they don't want to get sick.
One of the biggest tragedies that we have to deal with and must recognize in our transformation strategy is the people who have been in the coal industry in particular. If you're in the mines for 3 weeks, you're going to have lung issues for the rest of your life. And if you're blowing ground rock down into the gas lines, have you ever been on a site when they're putting that rock in there and it's blowing around and it's like drifting sand everywhere? You think you're not breathing some of that in? It's called white lung. And it's fine white powder. It behaves just like black lung, where the coal dust accumulates in your lungs. We have an obligation to those people. And as these companies go bankrupt, they're saying, oh, too bad, so sad, your pension is lost. And we can't afford to pay your benefits anymore. You're stuck with whatever you can get from the government. That's wrong. That is
absolutely wrong. It's a violation of the social contract. Yeah, absolutely.
The social contract has to be as important as the economic profit contract for the corporations, especially when you're dealing with multinational corporations who have no loyalty to the communities in which they are operating. And they may give a pittance. They may put 5% into the arts. They may do flashy subsidies and really, you know, highly visible charitable things, but it isn't anything like that disparity of the 227% to the 1% and only 47% to the 60% in terms of wealth. We've got to call them out, and we've got to demand better choices because we have options that are better.
We have several more comments I wanted to throw out there just because I do want these folks to be in on it. There's a comment from Karen Farradin. She says a job shouldn't be a death sentence. Thank you for mentioning sacrifice zones. Capitalism claims they are necessary to be free. They don't mention that the people they are making free are the capitalists. People in sacrifice zones certainly aren't free if they're dead.
Asthma for all their life.
Yeah. And they exaggerate numbers of jobs to distract from the fact that such jobs are harming those thousands of workers. Yeah, I know that you know this, but the jobs, that's always brought up, how many jobs this industry creates. And it really is a fiction. The numbers are highly inflated. It's I don't know. I don't know if you have any data on that, but I mean, I just know that that's the fact.
But I don't think data is really what the argument is about. I think what you have to recognize is that we have to come to a reckoning in this country of what is important to us. And what I like to quote Donella Meadows, who died recently of breast cancer, but she was one of the authors of The Limits to Growth. And one of the things that she said is that people don't need enormous cars, they need respect. You don't need a closet full of clothes, you need to feel attractive. You need excitement and variety and beauty in your life. You need identity and community and challenge and acknowledgement and love and joy. If you don't have those things, having a lot of money doesn't help you much. And if you,
and that's, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
You know, and you have a community of caring people around you, then life is worth living. And I know in this COVID experience, people have been confined to their communities where they are. And it's amazing to me how much people care about each other when they have to. And, you know, helping each other out, entertaining people's children because they're driving themselves crazy, doing things that, you know, make sure you check on the ones who are living alone and make sure that people are fed and have what they need. That is what makes life worth living, is the community of care. And
absolutely,
is only as strong as the weakest among us. And when we get to the point where the corporate profits, especially of multinational corporations who aren't even here, matters more than our elderly and our children and those who are sick and those who may need extra help or the unemployed, those people are us. And we are only as strong as the weakest among us, because that reflects how strong our network of caring may be. And it's our network of caring about each other that really keeps you living and resilient and responsive and creative. If you don't have that, then we really are isolated one to one to one, and it's like me first and me only. And the multinational corporations feed on that.
They're thrilled with it. Sure. I mean, that's one of the things that actually this campaign started talking about a long time ago. And that is that we really have lost community. And it's a lot of it is related to the jobs. I mean, people have to work long hours and they don't have time to be with their kids. They don't have time to be with their neighbors. They don't have time to be with each other even.
They don't live where they work.
And that too. Yes.
That's have that cohesion that it had when everybody went to one place and they came back on a streetcar and walked through their town to get home. I mean, it was a different kind of a world. And I mean, I'm an old lady, okay? So I remember the days when, you know, everyone lined, and it was tough, hard times, but there were also joyful times. Because
absolutely. And that's something that is missing, and it's because we do not prioritize community. You said it, I agree.
And we had a dream of a common purpose, a better future, and we saw it. And what I'm telling you, and I believe deeply, is that if we embrace this opportunity to build our community back better on a platform that rests in harmony with the natural law instead of in opposition to it, if we accept the fact that we are creatures of the earth and learn to live, it is abundant. It is an abundance. It is a condition of flourishing. I mean, if you leave a patch of asphalt alone, in 10 years, you're going to have a meadow. because the plants find a way through the cracks. And you have no way to hold back a flourishing natural system unless you deliberately poison it. So what we need to do is stop deliberately poisoning the land and poisoning each other and go to systems that do not harm us, but rather help us to become part of a nourishing and flourishing future and regenerate and become a regenerative culture instead of a destructive culture.
That's powerful stuff, Patty, really. One thing I did want to talk about is I sat on a panel with Arjun Makanjani. He actually wrote Maryland's renewable energy plan. And one of the things he talked about was democratizing the grid. And some of the things he talked about was making every home an energy hub, like making energy, and also with a smart grid that was able to allow people to use their, and you talked about this earlier, but to use their electric in a smart ways so that they were able to sell excess power back and also store excess power. Do you have any thoughts about that for small communities like we have in District 64?
Well, you can do this. Community energy systems are common in a lot of parts of rural America. Even places, the rural electrification of America started with cooperatives in rural
areas. We have lots of those. In fact, I'm on one, so yeah.
So that concept applies really well to shifting over to cooperative production of food, cooperative production of energy. And if you do it on a community basis, it's personal. Everybody has a stake in it. If you have a community garden, you don't have vandalism because everybody has a vested interest in having that work, And I think that's what we need is we need to reconnect to each other, reconnect to the land, and understand that if you're good to the land will heal. The land will heal us. And if you don't do that, you don't have healthy people on a sick planet. So to me, I think it's really essential that we begin to recognize what's real versus what is hype and mythology, and just start calling the myth out. We're not going to get a prosperous, equitable, resilient world on fossil fuels. It just isn't going to happen because the problem will get worse and worse and worse, and it'll take more and more and more to bail us out.
Yeah, so we're almost at the end of our hour. I wanted to do a few plugs. First of all, Patty, I want you to plug your website because it is filled with more answers to what we're talking about tonight. I mean, I started going through it the other day and wow, just so much stuff. So why don't you give us that?
PatriciaDeMarco.com. It's very easy. It's DEMARCO, PatriciaDeMarco.com.
And check out her blogs. She does them regularly, and there's a wealth of information.
And we have a podcast now with the Battle of Homestead Foundation, which is called Essential Work, the Past, Present, and Future of Jobs. And it's on every Friday. There's a new edition, and mine comes on once a month. So my second one will be recorded on Monday and posted next Friday.
So definitely check that stuff out. The other thing I want you to check out is our webpage, Mike4PA64.com. We've got a bunch of proposals that are also looking at this this problem, jobs and water you can drink. We have jobs you can live on and water you can drink. The water you can drink is basically addressing the fact that we need to take care of our home. We can't be polluting our water. We can't be polluting our air. We have to, I love what Patty was just talking about, and we talked about it in our campaign too, and that is we have to build our communities. We have to care for each other. Just powerful stuff. I really appreciate you bringing that stuff up, Patty. And we have several more conversations that we're going to be having in the next weeks. A couple of them are, we talked about, we're looking to bring some farmers on to talk about farm policy. Patty, I don't know if we even got to that. I know you talked a little bit about farm, but you also, I was hoping you'd talk a little bit about how farming can help heal.
Yes, you can go to Reimagine Appalachia, the blueprint. There is a white paper that came out on Tuesday on reviving the Civilian Conservation Corps as a way of regenerating the land and healing the land, and using that mechanism for a modern day interpretation of that New Deal program to help restore mined lands. So that's a pretty exciting project too.
Yeah, that's powerful. And then the last one, she hasn't said yes yet. I just sent her a note, but I'm hoping that we're going to have Ellen Gerhardt on, and she can talk about eminent domain and energy transfer partners. So anyway, thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. And
vote, make sure you vote, make sure you vote. Please vote.
Definitely need.
And vote for all the Democrats up and down. I'm sorry, this is not a bipartisan thing.
Well, I will say that there's no Democrat in my race. So anyway, yeah, please vote. We need votes. We need to get people in office that will put these kind of things into practice. All right. Thank you, everybody. And Patty, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Take care.
Good night.